What up, what up? All my scientists, my artists, my philosophers, my geneticists, my roboticists, my biologists, my archaeologists, my astronomers. Let's get busy. This has been Busy from the Burbs. Chip. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Busy from the Burbs, recording in Osaka, Japan this morning. This is a very special episode number 6 of the Get Busy podcast. I'm joined here today with my colleague, my good friend, a former Marine who I served with, AJ McComb. Ladies and gentlemen, please, warm welcome for AJ McComb.
All right, thank you very much for that round of applause. I really appreciate it. Like Ben said, AJ McComb, known Petey for 3 years now, 3.5 years. So hopefully we can work together on this podcast and really get the information that we want to get out there to the people we want to get it out there.
Yeah, exactly. And the repartee as well is really important. Like I was soliciting feedback from some friends, mutual acquaintances who were listening to the podcast, and they said, "Okay, yeah, it's good, Ben, but you need somebody there. You need that interplay or whatever. You know what I mean? You need that. You need somebody to talk to. You can't just talk to nobody."
Same thing. When I was listening to it, me and my fiance were like, this would be on a different level, because it's good to start off with, but it'd be on a different level if there was that dialect, the interchange of conversation from one person to another.
Yeah, absolutely. The dialogue is incredibly important, especially when you're trying to get other people to kind of like resonate with whatever it is. Because, for example, if you know something and I don't know it, to hear just one person speak, like no one is there to play the role of the listener. You know what I mean? But when you're speaking, I'm playing the role of the listener. The listeners at large that may be out there listening. When I'm speaking, you're playing the role of the listener. It's important to have both of those roles.
And also, the devil's advocate. I love playing that role.
Yeah, boy.
You know that for sure.
Oh, goodness gracious, yes. So, let's get into it.
Yeah, with that being said.
So there's a number of items in the news, as many of you who are listening might know. Recently in Saudi Arabia, on September 11th, a crane came loose from its moorings, presumably the concrete holding it to the ground. AJ, you have more on that. Well, what exactly happened there?
So what they're reporting is that the concrete supporting the crane gave out, causing it to tip and actually crush the building with people inside.
You know what I heard? Yeah. You know what I heard? Who owned that crane? Whose family owned that construction company?
I haven't heard of this. Who?
The Bin Laden family. The Bin Laden family, for those who don't know, it's not just Osama Bin Laden ain't just some, Wahhabist extremist Muslim nobody from nowhere, Pakistan or wherever they want to say he's from. Osama bin Laden is the son of a very powerful, very wealthy Saudi Arabian family, and their claim to fame in Saudi Arabia is they basically have a monopoly on all. I want to stop short of saying monopoly. I got to be careful with those claims. I don't know for a fact. But they own and operate one of the largest construction companies in the Middle East based in Saudi Arabia.
And that would make sense to his access to, like when they found him in that house, he had access to basically whatever he wanted. He had things in the house where they found him that, someone in that region shouldn't have. And I don't want to go into detail on everything, but like the computers, the technology he had, the information and stuff they had in there. Someone in that region shouldn't have had what he had, and that explains. Because money gets you in whatever you want.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Now there's a strong case to show that Pakistan was harboring him, knew where he was, and that money for his subsistence was coming. And it comes as no surprise to anyone. Was coming from Saudi Arabia.
Basically a ransom to keep him there. Not really a ransom as in, to come get him, but basically,
like a
hey,
like a babysitting fee.
yeah,
Like
this,
you pay your babysitter.
yeah, well, you take this money, he stays there, you're none the wiser. Wipe your
Right.
hands clean of it. If they find him there, oh, we didn't know. You can play dumb.
Right. Which is exactly it speaks to like this larger issue with geopolitics is that when one thing happens in a place, for example, like Pakistan, okay, Pakistan had Osama. I don't want to dwell too much on this subject. We keep it moving, but it's funny how there are like these apparent alliances, which although they may not be like publicly spoken, like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia don't, hold a press conference together. Maybe they do. I don't know. And they're not like shaking hands. And I guess in Saudi Arabia, like men kiss each other or something. I mean, whatever. It's neither here nor there. I just saw that. I remember seeing the photograph of King Abdullah, who came to visit the White House shortly after September 11th or in that time period, and was like kissing then President George W. Bush on the mouth or on the cheek. I don't know what it was. Anyway, uh, basically, like you see the ties between these countries. Like even though Pakistan and Saudi Arabia don't announce their friendship to the world, the fact that there's this tacit kind of agreement there as it pertains to Osama bin Laden, which, by the way, if you were to ask the Saudis, straight up, hey, were you in any way aiding or abetting Osama bin Laden? What do you think the answer would be?
Of course not.
Right, of course not, right? No, absolutely not. But I think it's just interesting, like that old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like there are these invisible, and this is going to start to sound conspiratorial, which I don't want it to sound, but there are like these invisible, like, I don't know, like friendships, alliances that exist kind of in the interstices of your regular diplomatic, like public announcements that aren't really very visible to the world. I could be overstating it. I think maybe the friendship, the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan is well documented, but yeah, just wanted to say that.
Well, yeah, I think that region, there's a handful of countries in just a small little area. So you got to pick your enemies and your friends wisely. So that way, if you got to turn on them,
Oh yeah, I didn't think of that.
it's like I think of it like being on a school bus. If you're sitting in the back, you're going to be next to the cool people. But if you want to be able to move to the front, you're going to be friends with them too, so you can go wherever you want in the bus. It's kind of how it is when you, like, for example, Iraq right now, they're stuck in the front of the bus because we put them there.
Mm.
Whereas
Right.
India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, basically anyone we haven't gone to war with, they're still in the back of the bus trying to figure who's going to be friends with who in case whatever happens.
That's a really good analogy, actually, because it's like, you know, when you observe even recent American foreign policy within that region, you'll see the same stuff happening. For example, like it wasn't too long before the invasion of Iraq, the second invasion of Iraq, or even Desert Storm, when Donald Rumsfeld, then I forget what his cabinet position was. He was in Iraq. There's that famous photograph of him shaking hands with Saddam Hussein, and then flash forward like less than a decade. I think maybe it was longer than that actually. I mean, the invasion of Desert Storm was like 91, and that photograph of him was taken either it was during the Reagan administration. It was either 83 or 86. I forget what. But yeah, it's like, or it might have been Bush one actually during his presidency. But you'll see how quickly that changes. I mean, it's pretty frightening. You don't really get that in the United States. America and Mexico, for quite some time have been on pretty like solid diplomatic ground, right?
I mean, of course, because they have to, because they trade so much stuff back and forth, whether it be goods or services. Only thing is, the populace each way has a negative view on the other populace.
Yeah.
America only sees poor immigrants trying to cross the border illegally to get what we have, and
Hmm.
then on the other hand, they see privileged Americans trying to come over and just party in their country. You know,
Right, party in their country or exploit their labor in their country,
yeah, with
right?
business or whatever. So I mean,
Yeah.
but it's a mutual right now agreement because Mexico is like a little step-headed red child.
Mm.
He's just gonna get smacked around and go back to do what he's got to do.
Mm. Yeah, and it's like there's a mutual fucking that's going on, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's like
you're gonna take it, and then it happened.
you're gonna take it and you're gonna give it. Like that's basically what's happening. It's like, I mean, it just kind of speaks to like, I don't know. I don't like to, portray myself as endorsing anarchist beliefs, because anarchy, in the strictest sense of the word, kind of it evokes certain feelings of uneasiness or fear, even. But anarchy, like at its root, basically just means no leaders, and no leaders means no nations. Now, it's kind of like a radical idea, but many anarchists will say, well, no, you have to start from what's known as the principle of non-aggression. And by starting from this principle of non-aggression, which is, I agree not to fuck with you, you agree not to fuck with me, and we just go on about our way. The problem with anarchy is, what happens if there's a grievance? Who resolves that grievance? Oftentimes, anarchists will say, well, we'll have like at least anarcho-capitalists will state that the market will dictate, the market will resolve it. But there's no real resolution for a monopoly that might be causing really, really serious harm to another person, and it kind of gets muddled from there. I mean, what I'd like to do is just be able to lean back and say, okay, hey, you're a person, I'm a person. We're people, they're people. It's one planet. We can all work together, dissolve the borders. It doesn't matter. But the thing is, like, we have the borders. We have to kind of work within this system, don't we?
Well, I think the borders serve a purpose. I mean, not that it's needed, but they serve a purpose because they're there and they've always been there. Even like back, I don't want to say
But to
that.
say that they've always been there, they haven't always been there. Like, if we go back, a sufficient amount of time, there were no borders.
I mean, if you go back to documented history, take the Roman or past that era,
Okay.
what did they do? They built a wall around their community, and then if it got bigger, they built a bigger wall. So they built the borders physically, so you could actually physically see them. Like, I can't go in there unless I take it by force. And now we have basically virtual borders, virtual walls to say.
Hmm. Well, that raises an interesting question about state. Um, what do you call it? State citizenship or
Global
yeah,
citizenship?
yeah, global citizenship. And you have like I think there was a digital country that was being started not too long ago, and they were actively soliciting um, new citizens for this. Basically, you'd be issued an oh, is this it? Estonia? Estonia, first country to offer e-residency digital citizenship. It states here, this was published October 7, 2014. Estonia is to become the first country to offer e-residency to people around the world, offering state-proven digital identities that give access to services like online banking, education, and healthcare. That was for uh, Estonia.
I don't know. I think Estonia is in Africa.
Estonia is
I'm sorry, in
it's
Europe.
Yeah, it's Eastern Europe. I think it was a former Soviet state.
What that sounds like to me is they're soliciting revenue.
That's what it is.
We'll
Yeah.
give you a free citizenship. You use our banks, you buy stuff, you sell stuff, and we profit off of it. That's what it
Right.
sounds like. But it opens the door for that, like you said, digital citizenship. And so does Bitcoin and all the digital currency
Ah, Bitcoin. Yes.
that open the door for a digital currency to take over.
Yeah,
But
it says here Estonia, this is from the Wikipedia, a developed country with an advanced high income economy and high living standards. Estonia ranks very high in the Human Development Index and performs favorably in measurements of economic freedom, civil liberties, education, and press freedom. It was third in the world in 2012 for press freedom. Estonia is often described as one of the most wired countries in Europe. It's interesting. So yeah, you mentioned Bitcoin. Um, it mentioned we talked about at the top. We had our meeting about Apple Pay, Android Wallet. Can you get into more detail? What is Android Wallet, and when was it released?
Android Wallet was released actually before the weekend started on Friday. Um, and basically, it's Android's version of Apple Pay. And if you don't know what Apple Pay is, you basically upload any plastic money, whether it be credit card or debit card, to your phone, and you link it from your bank account. And Apple says that the information is only stored on the hardware of your phone and not like in the cloud or something. So only
And an NSA database.
yeah,
I mean,
and yeah,
that's kind of
once you do
default.
that, NSA copies it and they have their version. But so basically, Android Wallet is Apple's version of that. I mean, Android's version of Apple Pay. But the thing that makes me I use Apple Pay. It's convenient for like iTunes or something like that. And when you're just like you have your phone out at the store, you tap the register, boom, you paid. It's
Is
nice.
there a lot of setup with that though? Do you have to get like a letter from your bank and like do all kinds of crazy, registration stuff? Like what's going on with that? What's the setup like for something like that?
It's kind of like registering for a website. You input your email address, you get a verification, you click the link, and you're verified. It's pretty much the same thing. Once you get verified with your bank, you're done.
Oh,
So
okay.
then you can use it. But the thing is, you now put Android or Apple in charge of your money, so to speak, right? They
Well,
have
you're giving them permission to do what exactly? To debit your account?
yeah, they're basically completing the transaction for you. So instead of they're being the third party person, um, actually doing the transaction, whether it be on a digital mean, because you can buy stuff with your Apple, your Touch ID on your phone using Apple Pay, and it's like if you're on a website, you hit buy, it'll ask you to put your Touch ID in, and boom, you bought it. Same thing at a store because it uses an IR receiver. So I mean,
Right, near field communications, right? RFID or whatever the other technology is.
yeah, it's the same thing. Like new credit cards have that chip in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, but it's digital. Instead of having to actually read it physically on the card, it does it digitally. But the thing is, you're giving Apple or Android complete access to your bank account. That way they can make the debits when you buy stuff.
What are the security risks we're looking at? I mean, you mentioned one of the things you didn't like was the fact that you were potentially opening yourself up to fraud. One by giving all of your information to Apple to serve as an intermediary. Now, Apple, we've already seen Apple's been hacked, right? iCloud was hacked. Other companies have been hacked, right? Most notably recently, Ashley Madison, though I don't think either of us have to worry about our information turning up on Ashley Madison. The potential risk, and this had afflicted Sony as well. I mean, they were beset by breach after breach after breach of customer data. the risk is that, okay, your individual credit card might not be stolen, but your individual credit card information might exist in a giant database of millions of other people's, which could be stolen as well. Like, is that one of the potential risks? And how overblown is that? Is that rather exaggerated, or is this feasible for something like that to happen?
Well, the difference is for a physical copy, if it gets stolen or someone copies information, you can cancel your credit card, get a new one sent to you, and it's got a new number. That problem's solved. It's pretty simple. People do it every day for whatever reason. But with the digital, you may not know that your information has been taken, or you could just basically be blind to a company coming in or a group of people using your information for their gain, and you have no knowledge of it. That's what I like. For example, Google. You go to Google, you search something, and then you go to Facebook or Twitter, you get an advertisement from Google searches. But you signed a user agreement when you created the accounts for it to do that. But it's different when your personal information is getting exploited for someone else's gain, at least in my opinion.
Now, can't you kind of offset? Can't you mitigate risk by requiring multi-factor authorization or two-step verification, like they use with World of Warcraft accounts and even Google? Like, if I sign in from another address, they'll send me a message to my phone, and it contains the two-step verification password that I'll have to input in order to be able to use that. Why don't they institute that as well? I mean, I don't understand why, if it would be as simple as just, I don't know, inputting a number into the keypad, why they wouldn't opt for that.
Well, the banks themselves, like if they see something that's not normal, or like say you're doing your transactions in one area and then the next morning there's a transaction across the world, they'll either call you or like, hey, did you make this transaction? Oh yeah, that's me. And then like, oh good, you're good. But when it's digitally, you can purchase anything anywhere digitally. There's no set location. So how do they know you're making the purchases, right?
Right.
Because you can
buy
anything on any website from any location, unless every location is geotagged. Then that's even more information they got to sift through. Like, it comes with safety measures, but also comes with more work needing to be done to solve those issues.
Yeah, a lot of risk kind of built in with that. Like, I was teaching my class yesterday. We were talking about toys of the future, and we were talking about adult toys, right? And we got to talking about cars, how the brand new BMWs or Mercedes, whatever the case may be, these new cars contain like 16 different computers controlling everything from climate to power steering to suspension or whatever it is. And I talked about the risk that is posed by these technologies. I think I've talked about it in previous podcasts briefly. I forget if it was the first one or the second one, but there was a journalist by the name of Michael Hastings who was a journal for Rolling Stone. I think he was on a number of different outlets. He did a lot of work on the ground in Iraq, Afghanistan, I think, to an extent. I'm not sure really what his resume is, but anyway, he didn't make too many friends in the higher echelons of either the military-industrial complex, the standing military, or government. Right? He was kind of a firebrand or an upstart. He was a truth seeker, and he ruffled a lot of feathers during his tenure as a investigative journalist, specifically covering stories within or having to do with the military operations, military personnel, so on and so forth. And he died under kind of mysterious circumstances. And then this guy, Richard Clark, who served as, I forget what his actual title was. He was a former national coordinator for security, infrastructure protection, and counterterrorism. Actually, unfortunately, during, I think, September 11th, so it doesn't really speak very highly of him He wasn't very good at his job, but then again, multiple agencies failed the American people on that fateful morning. He came out and said that actually, given the state of technology, that it looks like Michael Hastings was the victim of a car hack. Now, this is the world. This is the brave new world that we're entering. Like as society, as services, as devices become further networked and digitized, we're opened up to these risks that before would have just been as simple as canceling the credit card and ordering a new one, right? What do you think? What is this going to do? Like, how do you see this going forward? Like, yeah, what do you have to say about that? Do you have any input on that?
Well, he's been quoted on an interview saying that the Obama administration declared war on the press, which would have been himself because he was part of the press. And he's been seeking, like Edward Stoda, for example, he was digging into that because he thought there was more than what was being told. So, I mean, was he a target for asking too many questions? I don't know. But as far as going digital, I'll use an example. My fiance and I, she's looking to buy a new car, and we test drove a new Subaru Crosstrek. It has, I think they call it EyeSight Plus technology, and you can set your cruise control to 45, right? And we went on a test drive, and the car in front of us slammed on the brakes. Now the dealer trying to sell us the car, he didn't touch the brakes. His hands were off, his feet were off the gas and the brake. The car automatically had a distance set of, however many feet. It kept that distance controlled by a computer, and then it took the car to a complete stop, keeping that same distance.
Wow, it brought it to a complete stop.
And then it holds it for like 5 seconds, controlled by the computer, until it's like, hey, dummy, you got to do something.
Yeah, exactly. You need more input.
Yeah, exactly.
Need input.
So but that's just one thing controlled by a computer in the car. You got climate control for AC and heat. You got the radio. You got your Bluetooth so you can use your phone. And then you got airbags, all controlled by a computer. I mean, everything in a car now is in some way or shape or form controlled by a computer. And like you mentioned, in the hacking or the hackers, I don't know what you call it. Like they had like a little hackers group meeting, whatever, where they showed the best hackers using like simple laptops to break into complicated systems.
Right.
The same thing applies to a car. It's a computer, and a computer talks digitally. If you can talk to it, you can control it, right? All you got to do is simple line commands, and you're in to giving the computer commands. So say for example, for Mr. Hastings, you break into the cruise control computer, set the cruise control to 100, and now he can't deactivate it or hit the brakes because you have the cruise control set to 100, and you have an accident. And by everyone's, investigation or whatever, it was an accident.
Right, exactly. From the outside looking in, it looks like an accident, right? So when it first happened, there was like some talk about, maybe he was killed, but he had Adderall in his system. He had been kind of acting really paranoid recently, blah, blah, blah. But then his family was like, no, he would never do this. It was completely uncharacteristic of him. And then flash forward, a couple years, I forget when he died exactly, but flash forward a couple years, there's this piece in Wired magazine or on the website. The title is "Hackers Remotely Kill a Jeep on the Highway with Me in It." In the first couple paragraphs, it says, "I was driving 70 miles per hour on the edge of downtown St. Louis when the exploit began to take hold. Though I hadn't touched the dashboard, the vents in the Jeep Cherokee started blasting cold air at the maximum setting, chilling the sweat on my back through the in-seat climate control system. Next, the radio switched to the local hip-hop station. and began blaring Skilo at full volume. I spun the control knob left and hit the power button to no avail. Then the windshield wipers turned on and the wiper fluid blurred the glass. He goes on to say, da 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 da, like the Jeep came to a stop on the highway or whatever the case may be. Like this is an actual thing, and what before was just kind of like dismissed as kind of conspiratorial or whatever is garnered more traction with these recent revelations that this can be done.
Well, I mean, I think it was 2011 or 13. I don't know what year it was, but I mean, even then, that was what, 4 years ago now. Technology hasn't changed as far as how it speaks to. It uses the same mediums: Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USB. I mean, it uses the same mediums. They're just at different speeds. So
Right.
they could have used the same technology 4 years ago, but now you have greater range. Now you have faster communication from devices. So they may have just sent a one-line command to that car. I mean, still, we're speaking hypothetically here. We have no
Right.
proof of this, but it can be done, as you're saying here. The article shows that it can be done, and I'm trying to say that it was the same technologies we had 4 years ago.
Right. And you're talking about the potential enemies that Michael Hastings had. These weren't even just like research scientists, computer scientists or like hobbyist hackers that were doing this in the case of the Jeep most recently. These were, if they were from Michael Hastings, the circle of enemies that he may or may not have made, these were extremely capable operators. These were extremely technologically savvy people, or people that had access to people or technology that could affect something like this. It's not too far out of the realm of imagination or possibility to consider that that's not actually what happened. The thing is, the car was burnt to a crisp. The only question would be, where's the paper trail, right? Where's the breadcrumb trail? There has to be something, right? I don't know how often the car, like in the case of your fiance, I don't know how often the Subaru is phoning home and like uploading a log of its activity, or even if that's even done. I don't know if is there a black box that's part of these new computer cars where it's like, even in the worst, most heinous accident, that this repository of information would be preserved no matter what to give an accounting. I'm not sure about those things, but if there aren't those things, there need to be. And in the case of Michael Hastings, I don't know. I think it's a wake up call to the automotive industry and just people in general to, really raise the alarm in terms of like, okay, if these safety measures aren't in there, then they need to be put in there.
It's funny, the auto industry wants to go automated. At least most major car manufacturers are trying to get a concept car where it drives itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean,
yeah. I think Toyota just threw $75 million at AI for that, exact reason.
Google's done it, Ford's done it, Chevy's done it. Now, Ford and Chevy, they're not leading the pack in any way, shape, or form, but they have shown, like, most of their new models come with an option to where you can park assist, lane assist. So, like, if you cross the line, even if it's like a faded white line on the side of the road, it'll still pick it up and say, hey, it'll give you an alarm. Get back in the lane, or whatever the alarm is. So, I mean, they're trying to get people to get used to this automated driving, because 5-10 years from now, you're going to have to pay extra for a manual version, not as in manual gear, but you're the manual operator and not a computer.
Wait, you're going to have to pay extra for that option?
Because think about this. There would be less fatalities if a computer controlled driving, right?
Right.
I mean, there should be, at least, because a computer it's not going to be texting and driving. A computer's going to be driving, and that's it.
Unless you're writing a bunch of op-eds about how crooked the highest echelons of the military and government are, and
Yeah,
then
then
you
they
might
have
die in a computer controlled car. But
then they have the perfect opportunity to make it a viable accident.
the perfect kill.
And like you said, it's untraceable because the car only has ROM, random onboard memory, to
Right.
store, like, for example, cruise control. When you set the cruise control, it stores that in the ROM, and then when you click it off, it clears it out until you resume. Then it comes back on. So, like, there's no black box or hard drive storing any type of actions or communication being done. It's just strictly, line input, the command, out comes the action, that's done. There's no storage
Right.
of it.
Yeah.
But with that being said,
Yeah, so driving, so the automated driving as an option. I mean, so the manual driving as an option. So you said like more people would be safer if the computers were driving the cars. So think about it. Pick it up from there. What was the point you were about to make about manual?
well, I mean, it hasn't been like documented that this is going to happen. This is just more so speculation on what companies are doing. But it may not even be 5 to 10 years. It could be longer. But
Mhm.
cars can be held less reliable. For example, there was a big case back there about the airbags being deployed
Mm.
because people were getting in accidents or something, and the airbags were killing people.
Mm.
If the computer was controlling the car, there would be less likely of a chance of an accident, and you wouldn't be having to pay these bailouts or settlements or anything like that to cover accidents. So for as far as the car manufacturers themselves, it'd be cheaper for them in the long run to sell these automated cars.
Mm. Right, yeah. It's cheaper for everyone except who? You think, like, that's why I wonder, like, who's gonna hate this the most? Like, whose industry does this, does the robot car, the computer car, whose industry does that disrupt the most?
Enthusiast car owner industries, those that buy cars with the intent to customize them, whether it be the engine, interior, exterior, audio,
Mm.
whatever. You would
Because, yeah,
you wouldn't want to do that anymore because the car's basically like a little drone. You hop into it and it does what it does, and that's it. There's no like,
it's an all up round.
yeah, there's no customizing it unless you could paint it, but then that would be come from the factory. You wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, no. I'm wondering, like, what about the enthusiasts? What about the hobbyists? You know, it seems like computers, even like, first they started out as like a hobbyist venture, right? Back when Wozniak invented the Apple One, Apple Two, right? When he designed that, and then you move over into kind of what we have kind of now. You have these really clean but extraordinarily difficult to work with or modify computers, such as the MacBook Pro. However, the entire time that's been going on, there's that hobbyist or the enthusiast market has still existed. So I'm wondering, like, who is going to be the what do you want to? I want to say like the open source or the not open source, but maybe like the PC, I guess PC like gaming computer market equivalent of the future computer car. You know what I mean? Like the company that really doesn't give a shit what you do with it. Like they'll sell the components, right? And you can build it, and you can hack it. You can do whatever you want to it.
I mean, I'm a gaming enthusiast. The only PC I've ever bought is a Mac, right?
Mhm.
Every other Windows PC I've bought the components and built myself.
Mhm.
But the majority of people go to a store and buy one pre-assembled, usually in laptop form.
Right.
But now you go and you kind of change this into the automotive industry. Everybody buys theirs pre-built, right?
Mm.
Then you make your customizations, whether it be, audio systems, intakes, whatever it
Graphics
is.
cards.
Yeah, whatever it is you do to make it yours. Now you're not doing that to drive it. You're doing that to ride it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
It's no
I
long.
see. Yeah.
It's no
You're not
longer.
just trying to get from point A to point B. You're trying to get from point A to point B at at half the time or whatever
or
at a million miles an hour or
or
whatever.
to be able to do work or whatever it is on the way to A to B.
Right. Yeah, that would be the equivalent. Right.
Because every time you see Google showing off their automated cars, what are they doing? They're reading a magazine, they're on their phone, they're doing something on the laptop or something. Like,
Hmm.
no one's driving anymore. It's like riding in a bus or a train.
Right.
What does everybody do in a train? They're on their phone or they're reading something. They're
Right.
interactive. And that's what the automated automotive industry would allow.
I don't know how I feel about the proprietary nature of these advancements and these developments. Now, I wanna, I want to, I want to clarify that. I understand that developing these systems takes an incredible amount of money, of man hours, of technical know-how, and so on and so forth. But to the point where we're selling these cars and we're not really selling them anymore. We're like leasing them to people, right? Because they can't, yes, you own it, but the trend has been, especially in software these days, where you don't really buy a piece of software anymore. You buy the license. You subscribe to it as a service, right? Software as a service, namely. Uh, I could I could I could see that like hardware as a service becoming an actual thing where it's like you subscribe to this hardware platform. It's kind of like a lease, like a short-term lease. And as a result of it, you don't get to own it, but you do get, the maintenance for free or whatever. You get new models, at a discounted price or whatever it is. But I don't know if I like that idea. Like I maybe I'm just old school. But when I buy something, I want to have that that point of sale. I want that to be the final transaction. I don't want there to be any conversation or anything else unless it's broken or it's not working right. Like that's the only reason why I would want to communicate with the company that I bought it from. Other than that, like just leave me alone. Like I paid you money. Like let me do what the fuck I want to do with what I paid for, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, cars are the second biggest investment you will make in your life, aside from your home, right?
Mm.
Homes are anywhere from 150,000 above, where cars are normally 20,000 or more.
Right.
You lose immediately. You have depreciation of value on the car. So you spend 20,000, it's now worth maybe 18 if you're
Mm.
lucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now the lease option, you don't occur any of that loss of interest, so to speak. I mean,
Right.
you're just borrowing it, and then you're going to give them it back at the end of the lease or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think, now this is where we differ. I think a lease is better because if you go to buy a new car,
Mm-hmm.
the loan amount, monthly payment, is normally 2 to 3 times more than what you pay for a lease.
Right.
And then but you still get maintenance is taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Only thing is you're limited on what you can drive it, right?
In terms of range.
Well, normally it's like 36,000 miles for a 3-year lease or 10,000 miles a year, whatever your lease is for. But that's
Mm.
like the average, 10,000 miles a year for 3 years or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in the sense of automotive cars where you go in there, you pick the model you want, and then it drives you around, and then after a year or 2 years, kind of like what the iPhone's doing right now, where I don't know if you noticed, the Apple released the iPhone upgrade program.
Mm.
where you lease the product from them, never owning it, but after a year of paying on it, you can then upgrade to the newest phone, but you're always making a payment and you
So they
never own anything.
so they've already done this is already going on then. This hardware as a service, this is already taking place.
Well, my Sprint contract is technically like a lease program, but at
Right.
the end of the lease, I own the device, but I do have the option to turn it in and start a new lease on a new product.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's a lease to own versus a lease to not own. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think the only caveat with this, the only thing that makes the lease model make sense is the fact that, you know, new models of phones, new models of cars are constantly being released, right? Like with new functions and new features and stuff. So there's the incentive is to get the new model for cheaper. You would opt in for this hardware as a service or software as a service, right? You might not ever own it, but then again, who wants to really own something that's just going to be obsolete the next year anyway, right?
and
So
appreciate in value
and depreciate in value, right? Until they become like collector's items, which may or may not even happen. You know, it
and
depends
takes
on.
20 plus years for that to happen.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, it makes sense from that perspective. I'm just wondering when a car can only do so much stuff, okay? I mean, a car is not like a phone, right? With a phone, you get better quality cameras and better quality displays and so on and so forth. With a car, however, I think actually owning, for example, Tesla is preparing to release, I think it was like a $25,000 car they're looking to mass market. Now, the Tesla cars, cars that are driven by electric motors, like these motors, they last. I don't want to say they last forever because they probably don't. I don't know enough about the platform, but the Tesla car is like much less apt to really depreciate in terms of like its serviceability or its functionality. I guess you could still make the same case for any car though. Any sufficiently proficient mechanic is going to be able to take any piece of shit that's not running at all and restore it, you know, with the right parts and technical knowledge. But I think there's something to be said about owning, in particular, a Tesla, because what do you really need it to do? You need it to get from point A to point B, and if most of the updates are coming via the software, and given the current Tesla model where upgrades come free, you get free upgrades. I mean, they might have implemented a new subscription service for the software side, but the hardware is basically done and it lasts for a long time, presumably. That's the only caveat that I could see why opting out of hardware as a service and opting in for actually owning the piece of hardware would be to your benefit.
Well, in that aspect, software easily is upgradable, right? You
Hmm.
just release an update, you download it, you're upgraded. Whereas hardware, it's a physical thing. For example, a car or a phone. When the new model comes out, you have the current model and you want to get the new model. Well, you're stuck with the current model, whether you got to sell it now or trade it in or whatever the case may be. You
Right.
have to actually physically get rid of the hardware. Whereas in the software, you can just change it to whatever you want. You can go back to the old version, new version, or the current version.
Right.
It's harder to do with hardware.
Right. The two are. What is it? What's the expression? That they're mutually exclusive or that they're not mutually exclusive?
Well, they go hand in hand, but they're both inclusive and exclusive at the same exact time.
Mm-hmm.
Because the software can't do anything with the hardware, and the hardware can't do anything with the software. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think in terms of like capitalism and consumer culture, that companies have been looking to move towards offering more options. Like the more options, I think it's a great time to be a consumer. Of course, I wish I had more money during this time in order to enjoy that. But still, companies I think these days are definitely offering a much wider range of possibilities in terms of ownership, leasing, what kind of lease, so on and so forth, partially owning it or whatever. I think it's good for the consumer. One thing that it's not good for, and I wanted to bring this up, but the tractor companies, the major tractor companies like your John Deere and your Komatsu or your I forget what they're like four major colors of tractors. You have the orange ones, the blue ones, the green ones, and the red ones. They're all different companies. John Deere, of course, we know the iconic yellow and green. Uh, Farmers that buy these tractors, I mean, in these combines. These are expensive devices, right? These aren't like the iPhone, whatever 400, 600, or whatever it is. Like these are, uh, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars, much more expensive, I think, than a $30,000 car. I'm not sure what the price tag is on a tractor, but I think they're more expensive than an average car. I could be wrong. Anyway, John Deere and these other companies have started implementing these controls, this DRM on these tractors. Now, back in the day, if a farmer had a tractor go down, every farmer was a de facto mechanic, or at least knew someone in his family or her family, or someone that lived nearby that was good or better with tractor engines than he or she was. And they would ask them, they'd come over, they'd look at the tractor, pop the hood, fix it, and then they'd get it back up and running, be back up, whatever the span of time was. Now, in order to make these fixes, if you have a tractor go down, granted they're more reliable, but that doesn't say that they still don't go down. When they go down, instead of you being able to fix your own shit, now you have to call the company. They have to send out the authorized tech to actually like hook into the computer and then, reset it or whatever. Like there's that scene in the movie Interstellar where the tractors their GPSs are all out of whack and they're like showing up because of the tesseract, the gravitational anomaly in the bookcase or whatever. They're all coming to the house. He would not be able to do that. Like that character in that instance is in fact breaking the law by, I guess you'd be voiding the warranty. Like you'd be jailbreaking your tractor. Like this is where it kind of gets ridiculous. Like, okay, I pay money for this thing, but I don't own it. Like, especially in the case of these tractors, they're paying for these tractors all up, but they're being prevented. They're being, what's the word? Hamstrung by these ridiculous licensing agreements where they don't let them work on them or modify them or even fix them without, direct permission or under the authorized, watch of an authorized technician.
Well, I mean, I think that's because tractors range in huge values from 10,000 to hundreds of thousands, depending on what you need to do with it, right? Mm. So if you're spending $150,000 on a tractor to do one thing, that's a huge investment, right? Mm. So you need to have some sort of support for it, because you shouldn't be expected to be the all-knowing doer fixer or fixer upper or whatever you want to call it, right? Mm. So you buy the tractor to use it to do a job. It breaks, you may not know anybody that can fix it, but it's more so to, I guess, protect the consumer against, I guess you could say, voiding the warranty, so to speak. Mm. But I do get the point that you bought it, it's yours. Let me do what I want with it. If I want to break it, let me break it. If I want to do whatever, what's this movie where they attach the tractors together and it's got Kevin Bacon and like the tractor pull, whatever.
Footloose?
Yeah, Footloose.
Footloose.
If you want to go do
Footloose.
tractor pull, go do tractor pull. It's yours. You bought it. But
Hmm.
then if you do that, the company's not going to come out and fix it for you because you're not using it according to some contract you signed or,
Yeah, you voided the warranty.
yeah, now you're screwed.
Yeah. There's a concept in software development called obfuscation. Pull this from the Wikipedia. It says in software development, obfuscation is the deliberate act of creating obfuscated code, source or machine code that is difficult for humans to understand. Like obfuscation in natural language, it may use needlessly roundabout expressions to compose statements. Programmers may deliberately obfuscate code to conceal its purpose, security through obscurity, or its logic in order to prevent tampering, deter reverse engineering, or as a puzzle or recreational challenge for someone reading the source code. Programs known as obfuscators transform readable code into obfuscated code using various techniques. I think this is what's done a lot in consumer electronics, in any industry that's consumer facing. There is this obfuscation that goes on. Similarly, there's also engineered obsolescence as well. And I don't know, like, I'm just kind of like, when I confront these realities, it's kind of frustrating that that this would be done. But when I look at it from the perspective of the company, it makes perfect sense, right?
Well, websites use that. Mostly websites. A lot of applications do it too, where they write the code and then they either give you a copy of the code to run the app or the website, or they give you quote unquote permissions to access their server to get the code to run the website or the application. Like the first part one where they give you the copy of the code. Now, technically, it's yours and you can do whatever you want with it. But that's why you sign that user agreement that nobody reads. Click yes if you
Yeah,
accept.
exactly right.
Well, it says in there, if you alter this, they're not, one, going to take care of any problems that come from it, and two, it's not up to them anymore. You voided the warranty, so to speak. But same thing with the hardware, like a graphics card for a computer. If you alter that to maybe overclock it or whatever, the company can't support the hardware anymore because they don't know what you did to it. Whereas if you use it in the stock config, they can see, oh, this would happen to it. We'll take care of that. Same thing with code or software. You know what I mean? But I don't know as far as licenses that use for software, like, because you pay for it, so technically it's yours, right? Any subscription or everything's going into subscription form.
Yeah.
Like you go to a website, it's like pay subscription to get our access to our stuff. It's like I just want to see it and I want to use it. I don't want to pay for it. Well, I mean, now you got to pay for it, and we're going to this kind of quote unquote pay to play model where you only get the features that like all the features it offers unless you pay for it. You get like the light version where you can do some stuff, but you can't do everything until you pay for it.
Right.
And that's where we're headed.
I've run up against this in these running apps. I've tried downloading countless numbers of these different run tracking apps, and every single one of them is pay to play. And I'm like, all I want is the option to have an app. Okay, what is it doing really? All it's doing is really tracking the course that I'm running, right? It's storing that either in the phone or on their cloud. Now, why not just have it stored in a database in the app on the phone that I can export? There's no reason why I should be having. My point is this: it's like with the subscription-based stuff, for something as like mundane as a kitchen timer, there's going to be a subscription model for a kitchen timer app. Like, how ridiculous is that? How simple does it have to get before the developer's like, yeah, we could make this a subscription model and keep people on the chain, or we could just make it a one-off so they buy it and that's it. Like, I see it right now. Everyone is doing subscription models, and then all it's going to take is really one upstart who says, you know what, to hell with this. Like, there's no reason for this to be a subscription based thing, for them to offer it as just a one off. I'm looking forward to that with the Run app. There's another point that I wanted to make.
Well, you can get that if you buy the hardware. You're going to pay for it somewhere. For example, the Apple Watch. It can do all that stuff, and it sync automatically with your phone. But you had to pay all up front for the hardware to get access to that software. Where if you get, a more simple or cheaper option, well, they're going to make that profit revenue up by charging you subscription to use it.
Right. I mean, is there an additional fee with the Apple Watch though for like the cloud, like to store my run data?
They give you 5 gigs free, but most people eat that up instantly, right? So they charge you 99 cents for 20 more gigs a month. So you have to pay 99 cents a month to only get access to 20 gigs forever.
Right.
I mean, it's where we're at right now as far as marketing is concerned for anything. They want to get you that monthly payment to get that money from you.
Right. Yeah, they basically want your paycheck to be deposited into their bank account. Like,
that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Oh, which plan are you on? The Google plan or the Apple plan? Okay, you're on the Apple plan. All right. And like all of your food, all of your electricity, everything is just provided by this one company or constellation of companies that kind of interoperate in some kind of loose alliance or whatever.
You know how it goes back to though?
What?
Android Wallet and Apple Pay.
It does, right?
I mean, that's opening the door to what you just said. Because they're going to have access to your bank account. Pretty soon, the bank's going to be like owned by Apple or Google. And then you're going to have to choose Android or Apple. Well, what if I want a fucking pair?
Right.
Well, you're screwed now because other companies couldn't compete because they could lower their prices, get more people, then jack it back up, or make stuff exclusively for them so then no one else can get it.
Do you think Apple and Google, do you think in the future, would you speculate like that? Well, first, let me talk about this. With like prosthetic like pacemakers or hearts, you have ever sophisticated new forms of technology. There was this movie Repo Man, right? It was a remake of an 80s film where these guys go around and they reclaim these like implants, like a cybernetic heart or whatever, artificial heart or artificial kidneys. Like, for me to consider this kind of dark dystopian future wherein someone like Granddad has an artificial heart installed, right? But it's subscription based, so that if his kids can no longer pay it, they just like turn it off or whatever one day. Like, that's kind of like a possible dark dystopian future that I don't think it will ever come to pass, because I think at the end of the day, like, human beings are actually legitimately, really actually looking to help one another. I don't think that would happen, but I could kind of foresee it happening in some kind of dark dystopian future.
A lot of future movies depict that, like Elysium. There's like a space station that only the elite get to go to, and they don't get cancer, they don't get sick. They got like the machine that just basically cleanses their body every morning, like taking up a shower that gets rid of cancer or gets rid of diseases or something like that. Like, they're paying for it, but they have the privilege because they're paying for it. So not like, as you're saying, there's going to be a void of people that can afford it and people that can't afford it. And the void will get bigger and bigger as time goes on because they'll jack the prices up, and then there'd be less and less people that could afford it. and you can control that clientele better than if it was open to the masses.
I want to ask a question. How would you characterize the relationship between Apple and Google?
It's a give and take. I mean, but most recent memory, Google released an OS update where the icons were kind of circular, as into what Apple's look like. And
Mm-hmm.
Apple won a lawsuit. I mean, I'm pretty sure, top of my head, I think it was $1 billion, millions or billions of dollars, where off of just what it looked like, right? So for me, if I was Google, I would be like, "You sons of how you gonna do that to me?" You know,
Mm-hmm.
you make apples, I make pears. They don't look anything alike, but just because they look similar, you're gonna come at me because I'm copying you. You know, th- there's competition, so to speak, but it's not good competition. It's like people that use Apple hate Android. People that use Android hate Apple. And so,
Mm.
and like, I don't know if you ever noticed, but like someone on an Android phone sees you using an Apple, they kind of hate you because you're a fanboy or you're, a hipster just because
Mm-hmm.
you're using something.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's already this like competition and hate instilled with people that use Apple or Google, you know? So it can only get worse, is what I'm trying to say.
That's what I'm getting at is like I'm speculating in the future, like could this ever turn antagonistic? Has it ever turned antagonistic? Is there a history, excuse me, is there a history in technology of there being active how do I say it? Like not just espionage operations, but actual corporate sabotage operations, whereby, for example, in the 90s when when Windows basically dominated the personal computing market, right? I mean, Apple's market share had shrunk considerably since everything, the Apple II and everything that was released in the 80s. During this time, Microsoft, granted they had a much larger market share, right? So there were more people using Windows, but there was also like a much higher prevalence of viruses, Trojan horses, malware, and still to this day on the on the Windows platform than for Mac OS during that period of time. I'm just speculating here, but what is there a potential that there was actually like a top secret operation on behalf of Apple to actually engineer viruses and Trojans and make was there a war? Was there a secret war between Microsoft and Apple? I know it's conspiratorial, but I'm just speculating here. And in the future, could we see something like this happen again between, in this case, it would be Google and Apple, I think.
Well, I mean, that would have started with software developers, and you really can't trace. I mean, the only thing you can trace is IP addresses, right?
Mm.
So, and those can be faked. You can show your
You
IP
spoof
addresses
IPs, yeah.
across the world when you're in your home. So, I mean, one, if that's the case, we'll never know. And two, is it possible that Android, or i.e. Google, could try and sabotage Apple Pay or one of their iCloud servers or something to
Right.
where people get paranoid to use their products, then switch over to Android products? I think that's, uh, it's possible. Will they ever claim to do it? No.
No.
And will we ever prove it? No.
No.
But it is possible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's food for thought. You see things like you said, like the fanboy wars, or things like Google developers like drawing Android icons, urinating on Apple icons on Google Maps and stuff, like little kind of indiscretions or little slights here and there. And you know, the question that I posed there was like, is there a potential for this to be more than just kind of like fraternity wars? Like, is there a potential for this actually to ever escalate in the future to a more violent, more I don't know, more straightforward, not shooting war maybe, but like much more direct. Okay, yeah, no, these two entities are definitely at war. Like this is no longer competition. This is war. But I don't
The
know.
only
I
thing
think
that
I'm
I think
yeah.
of is um, computer hardware for video cards. You got
Hmm.
two major manufacturers, NVIDIA and AMD.
Hmm.
And NVIDIA has been on top for a while,
Right.
and they are constantly releasing new products, and they're always faster than the previous product.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, AMD is, I mean, they debauched their last two major updates for its hardware. And it's kind of like, well, why would I pay the same price for a lower performing, part when I can get more performance per dollar? Well, for Apple and Google, it may come down to that, to where, because Apple, every release of a new product, they're talking about it's 10 times faster than the previous model.
Hmm.
Where Android, they have so many manufacturers, they can't make claims like that. You got Samsung, Motorola, Nokia. I mean, there's just so many manufacturer of phones that use the Android OS, and that they don't physically make the hardware, so they can't make claims that it's faster. They can't make claims that does things that it wouldn't do before. Whereas
Right.
Apple can, because they make everything. They make the hardware and the software.
Right. Well, I mean, Apple makes the hardware to an extent, though. I'd been reading about that, how they were trying to vertically integrate everything so that they own basically all of the companies that provide the technology that goes into the phones. But when you do the research, like the display technology, for example, and the terraced battery on the new MacBook, uh, number one, terrace batteries were done by Samsung, I think, like a while ago in a phone. So it's not really a new innovation. Apple is has the kind of annoying habit of making statements that it's making these technological innovations, like it is doing the innovating at the hardware level itself, when in fact it's actually the companies upstream, like Intel, like Samsung, like Toshiba with solid state hard drives and so on and so forth. These companies higher upstream, like Applied Materials or Global Foundries, that actually sell the machines to Intel, who then make the microchips. Like there are companies further upstream that are driving this progress, and yet when we hear an Apple keynote, all we do is hear Tim Cook up on stage, the really uninspiring, kind of dull Tim Cook. With all due respect, I'm sure he's a really sweet guy. He seems like a really nice person, but he doesn't have that moxie, I don't know, that I would look for to become excited about a product. But we see these announcements being made by Tim Cook on stage where he's like, our team, or we have been really hard at work at doing everything that we can to make this truly the most astounding and astonishing iPhone release yet. Like they always use words like that, right? And it's like, wait a minute, motherfucker. You're just taking the parts from different vendors and kind of putting them together. You're not really advancing display technology. You know, they're not actively um, they're not principally involved in advancing the resolution of display technology. They're not principally involved in shrinking the dies, for increasing the processing power and efficiency of microprocessors. Like all they're doing is kind of assembling this stuff, and they're consumer facing, right? But there's this whole like back end that we're not privy to. The business to business transactions, that's where the real innovation's happening. It's happening in the universities, then it's being transferred to the industry in some cases. Sometimes it's happening at the industry level. I can think of an example, but every company has their R&D. But with Apple, it's like much more design oriented. Yes, they have a lot of brilliant people working for them, but they're more or less like conductors of the symphony, and much less like the owners of the symphony hall, which would be companies like Applied Materials and Global Foundries, and under them Intel and so on and so forth.
What do you think though is, whoa, there's a crazy lag right now.
Mm. Well, I mean, what would be the question there? It's like, where did we even leave off? I have no idea where we were before I went on that tear. Like, I mean, you're in agreement, right? That like, okay, yeah, Apple is responsible for a certain degree of innovation, but in fact, at this point, they're really just a holding company. They're buying up brains, but what are they really doing themselves in order to drive innovation? If I have a car company, or if I have an AI company, right? And then you own a car company and you buy my AI company, you know, laws of capitalism state that pretty much any innovation or discovery that I made, you now own. But it's the same argument that's kind of made against the significance of Steve Jobs versus Steve Wozniak. Who was the real brains behind Apple Computer? Was it Steve Jobs or was it Steve Wozniak? Well, it can go either way. People debate it. In my personal opinion, this is just my personal opinion. You might have a different opinion. The brains behind Apple, what made Apple Apple, had very little to do with Steve Jobs. Like without the engineer, without Steve Wozniak actually soldering, actually designing the first board for the Apple One, without actually creating that first initial product, there would have been no Apple.
Well, it comes down to they have to source what they want to a company.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, the new 3D touch technology that they're releasing with the new iPhone. They're saying, hey, we want to be able to do this. Can you give us the hardware to actually do this?
Mm-hmm.
And then so now they got to create it basically. Say, hey, can this work? Or do you need us to tweak this or that? So basically
Yes.
what Steve Jobs was saying, hey, I want to do this. Steve Wozniak's like, all right, well, then I'll make this.
Right. So in that sense, like the designer is kind of driving the innovation.
And that's what, like, Johnny Ive, the British guy, he's always saying, we've strived so hard to make the most beautiful interface that works seamlessly with the hardware. Well,
Yeah.
they do, but they source out the actual work to the company.
Right. Yeah, it makes you wonder like what are they actually doing? What if you go to the Apple campus, you go to the headquarters and it's just an empty building with like a fucking supercomputer at the center that's everyone else is just on vacation. Every Apple employee, like it's all a farce. Like they've automated their way out of it long ago. It's all outsourced to, Chinese companies and factories, like these poor Chinese slaves who are, slaving over producing all of these devices and stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic there that's at work. Like which came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to. I just feel like from where I stand, like I wouldn't I wouldn't have like my demand for a glass doesn't produce the supply, I guess. Like I don't know. It's so weird to like. It's kind of like an optical illusion, like one of those things. Like, is it a vase or is it two faces? You know. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the fact that we've arrived at the crux of the paradox is like is you know, maybe we've beaten the game at this point on this discussion. But I think we're closing in on, if we haven't already passed the 1 hour mark. Do you have any other
Yeah, I think we're at an
news?
hour and 10.
We're at hour and 10 right now. It's great. So what I'd like to do is just wrap up here. I've started saving a number of the links that we'll provide in the description. We want to thank you very much for listening to episode 6 of the Get Busy podcast. We invite you to tell your friends about us, and definitely join us for the next one. If you're looking to help support the podcast, we're actively soliciting sponsors, supporters of all kinds. We've opened an account on Patreon, which is a website for individuals, content makers, creators, musicians, artists, engineers, or otherwise, to solicit funds from the online community to help them fund their research or their artistic endeavors or their podcasts or whatever the case may be. You can also PayPal us at getrealbusy@gmail.com. If you have any questions or comments, please email us there as well. You can find us on Facebook. My Twitter account is World Peace. AJ, do you have a Twitter account that you want to plug, or anything else that you want to plug? Any websites or anything like that?
Well, I do use Twitter, but my Twitter is socially for what I follow on like my interests. So it's a good way to communicate with me. It's AJ_McComb.
All right, good to go.
And that's just, you can, talk to me, tweet, whatever, reply to my tweets.
Yeah, troll me. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone to just basically bash me.
Out the woodwork. Yeah. I hate Android, or I hate Apple, or I love software as a service. I think we did a good job this hour, kind of like as objectively as possible, kind of like presenting both sides of each argument. There was a common theme here, the future in terms of digitization. We're talking about the Apple Android kind of divergence and security concerns, potential security concerns, what it means to the consumer, so on and so forth. There's a lot of good content in this podcast. If you have suggestions or comments and questions, like I said, for future podcasts, please email us or tweet me or AJ. And thank you very much for listening. AJ, do you have any last words, final words for the people?
No, just want to say thank you for having me on here. Appreciate those that are listening, commenting, supporting. Anything you can do to build this community is what we're looking for.
Yeah. All right, good to go. Thank you very much again, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. This has been Busy on behalf of AJ McComb. We'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening.